What is a woman is somebody who looks and presents as a woman. And I know a lot of people are like, oh no, it's biology. But let's be honest, no one checked my genitals or my chromosomes before calling me a woman on here. And I didn't check anybody else's chromosomes or genitals before calling them a woman.
So it's how they look like their physical appearance?
How they act.
Their performance, yeah.
Yeah, it's how they perform, basically.
No, because using circular definitions does not explain what a woman is. That makes the definition uninformative and sloppy, because it presupposes the very category it's meant to clarify. If definitions are supposed to help us distinguish one thing from another, this one fails. It also collapses the distinction between appearance and identity. Looking like X is not the same thing as being X.
An important question would be, say you take a cat and then you apply enough surgeries that it has a dog tail, dog ears, and then it starts barking all the time. Are you still going to call it a cat?
Yes.
That's the actual question that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I'd call it
now,
a cat.
some people
That's
would still call it a cat, right?
Because
I call it a mutant.
The issue is that
butchered animal.
The issue that we're running to is if you define gender as essentially the performance, right? If you separate gender and sex, although I would argue gender is obviously downstream of sex, but if you treat them as separate words, then the question is, why do we, like, if you're going to say gender and sex are the same thing, why do we have two words?
Kyla's bringing up one of the hardest and most interesting metaphysical questions. If a category is made of many traits and you alter those traits one by one, which actually changes the category? Let's ask the harder question. Could a male become a female by altering one trait at a time? The answer is maybe, but the problem is we don't know exactly where that threshold would be, or even what the decisive trait is supposed to be. Men and women are fairly distinct categories, separated by genetics, bone density, growth limits, bodily structure, muscle capacity, hormonal profiles, and brain chemistry. The more those traits are altered or approximated, the harder the classification becomes. And that's the real issue. Not whether change is possible in some superficial sense, but which changes actually alter the category itself.
What's a cup? Define for me a cup or a sandwich. What's a cup or a sandwich?
A cup.
What is a sandwich?
Something a woman makes. That's a joke. Come on.
That means curry is also
I
a
make some
sandwich.
good sandwiches,
So this is the chair argument,
Joe,
right?
come
It
on.
is the chair argument.
Yeah, so you can never define completely what a chair
No,
is.
actually, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm trying to say that we tend to define things in functional ways. That's the way that we use language, right? So, like, when we go, like, into, like, what's a soup? Is a smoothie a soup? It's in part a stupid fucking question because nobody cares.
Yeah, but...
What we do is we act like smoothies aren't really soup, even though they kind of are in almost every single way, but they're not really, like, nobody treats them like they're soup. So why we don't call smoothies soup. And so this is a way where I'm breaking out to, like, I wouldn't say that a trans person is a female. I wouldn't really be willing to confer those medical terms to them. But when it comes to woman, it's necessarily evolved as a word of functionality. And so it's like, it's really weird if you have Megan Fox, but she has a dick, for me to be like, oh, it's still a man. It's like,
I think that that's less weird. So definitions also have defining ends. They have support for what the definition's supposed to be. So we can look at words, and then we can look at the words that support those words. Yeah. What's the
Like the
word that
etymology.
supports the word of woman? It's female.
It's not.
It is. It's always
not.
been. When has it never? When has it not been?
This is a semantic dispute. A huge part of the trans debate is a battle over definitions. The left wants to expand the definition of woman so trans people can be included in that category, while the right wants to preserve the traditional definition of man and woman as terms rooted in sex. The dispute is conceptual. Both sides are fighting over what these words are supposed to track: identity and social role, or biological reality. And that distinction matters, because once the definition is stretched away from sex and toward affirmation, the word starts doing affirmation bias instead of descriptive work. The left is being deceptive, or at minimum empathetic in a sloppy way, by using the word woman to comfort trans people who want to be referred to as a sex they are not.
So the point is, our words have to reflect how we actually use them in reality. Otherwise, they're meaningless. Otherwise, I can call, you a chair or something like that, right? They have to have some reflection on our day-to-day usage. So you can say, like, oh no, like, technically, like, the appearance, it doesn't really matter, but it does matter because that is how we use the word. Functional definitions is what matters, a function of how we use the word.
So let's assume that we grant this for a second. Let me ask you a question. Is a male who identifies himself as a woman, who doesn't meet any of the criteria for what you would consider presentation, even though they're trying really hard. Is that still a woman?
I would say societally they fail to present as
Okay,
women.
but would you still call them one?
Personally, I would be respectful towards them, but I would say like, hey, you're not presenting
But
properly
wait, why
as
would you
a
do
woman.
that? It doesn't match up with the reality.
What? Because you can be respectful towards someone, right? But still be like, hey, just telling you like there is a non-consensual or not. You're not meeting the basis for a reality requirement.
So what you're showing me here, essentially, is that you will use the word that doesn't meet up with the expectation of reality. In order to
We do this
not
all the
be,
time.
in order to not be a little bit overtly sensitive towards that person. However, if I'm using the word which is more descriptive towards that reality, what am I doing wrong?
Andrew nails the contradiction in Pixie's position. She says definitions have to reflect real usage and functional reality, then instantly caves the moment that standard produces an answer she finds socially uncomfortable. So the principle turns out to be fake. Reality matters right up until reality risks offending someone. That's the core problem with this kind of left-wing definitional deconstruction. It dresses itself up as a serious theory of language, but the moment the theory clashes with affirmation, affirmation wins. Because for leftists, feelings matter more than facts.
Sure. So first of all, I've never argued for compelled speech. I ever think it's a violation of First Rights Amendments, I guess in America is what it's called. I don't believe in compelled speech. I think at the end of the day, you also have consequences for your free speech. So if you choose to call somebody who is clearly trying to perform in every single way as a woman, a man, they're probably going to think you're an asshole, and probably like 80% of the population.
What if you
will
call
too.
them?
This is probably the biggest reason why many people are hostile to trans activism. It's not because they're desperate to control how other adults dress, speak, or live. It's because the movement keeps trying to push behavioral and linguistic imperatives onto everyone else. That's where the problem starts. Plenty of people are willing to leave trans people alone, but they're not willing to be drafted into affirming a worldview they reject. And once that pressure shows up, the backlash is obvious. People aren't angry just because trans people exist. They get angry when they're told that disagreement is abuse, skepticism is bigotry, and non-participation is violence.